No, I don't want to hear your excuses. I said no more scrolling text. Why is there more scrolling text? What do you mean it looks cool? It looks naff, it looks tacky. Everybody does it nowadays when it comes to Star Wars. What do you mean I'm on? What am I on? Oh. Hi. Star Wars, the film, was a good, if not great, film. However, it could have quite easily disappeared into the ether had it not been for the sequels, The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. Bigger, bolder, and considered by many to be better. They took the Star Wars film and turned it into a franchise. And what is it that made the sequels so much better? Well, we could argue that until the Womp Rats come home. However, one idea is that the sequels took the original film and merely carried on a story. The first film was not the first story. In fact, the story is made up of all three films, and they're integrated together so well that really, without the other two, the first story doesn't feel complete. The same can be said for the Super Star Wars games. Obviously, the games were made a good 15 years after the films, so it was easy to assume that with Super Star Wars would come 2 more games. And only a year after the original was released, Super Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back made an appearance. Also known as Super Empire Strikes Back, which is what I will be referring to it as it's easier to say. The game is obviously so close to the original that it goes without saying that they must have made them with each other in mind. The looks are still great, the sound is still the same, and the gameplay is still tough. However, just like the films evolved, the games evolved as well, and there are some additions that maybe need to be mentioned. Each character has now been granted an additional attack, unique to that character. Han Solo can throw grenades with a press of the A button, and Chewbacca does this crazy spin attack thing. Neat. However, the most obvious character development is Luke Skywalker, as you would expect. After meeting Yoda in the Dagobah system, Luke now has a variety of force powers that he can use against his enemies. They're all fairly self-explanatory and include such powers as Force Invisible, which makes Luke invisible, Force Heal, which makes Luke heal some of his life, and Force Cheeseburger, which turns Luke into a giant cheeseburger. Okay, maybe I made that last one up. Now, it seems a waste of your time and mine to just repeat the same things that we said in the Super Star Wars review. The looks are the same, the sounds are the same, and the gameplay is the same. So let's leave those things to one side, and instead, in this review, refocus on the things that are completely new to Super Empire Strikes Back. Plus number 1 about this game. You get to wield a lightsaber. Oh yes. Now, the best thing about any Star Wars game, the thing that really decides if it's a good Star Wars game, apart from whether or not you're allowed to play as Vader, is how soon you are allowed to wield a lightsaber. And Super Empire Strikes Back lets you wield one from level 1. Oh yes. From level 1, Luke's weapon of choice is the lightsaber, and it sounds exactly as you would hope. With every wing, you feel like you're actually in the level. Of course, it makes sense to introduce one here, as a lightsaber in the first Super Star Wars game would have felt unnecessary. And even if Luke is rubbish with it to begin with, who cares? It's a lightsaber. Alongside the lightsaber, Luke can also switch to his blaster, if the player deems necessary. The blaster can be useful for reaching those enemies that are out of reach, but generally, most hardcore Star Wars fans will stick with the lightsaber. Now, obviously, the lightsaber in Super Empire Strikes Back isn't as fluid as using a lightsaber in, say, a more recent game. However, what would you rather? The 4 hours completion time that is The Force Unleashed 2, or Super Empire Strikes Back? Oh yeah. Alongside the lightsaber are all the force powers. These very quickly become vital to the game, and although you may not find yourself using them all, some of them are vital to the completion of the game. Force Heal in particular is a lifesaver. Quite literally. As with the original, this game is so difficult that even the smallest amount of help, like force powers, is so gratefully received. Now, obviously they couldn't make it too easy and allow you to use the force powers whenever you wanted, so what they did was they included a force power bar, and when that was down, no force powers. And when you had some force powers were yours. That way, you have to conserve your force power for when you really need it, or keep finding green orbs to add to the force power that you already have. The unique abilities of the other two characters are nice, but not completely necessary. It's nice that the developers tried to make the other two characters not as sidelined against Luke and his brand new force powers, but generally you can probably get through the game without their unique abilities. Sure, it does become a slight hindrance to play as one of the other characters, and sometimes you forget that there is no force heal when playing as Chewbacca, but at least the spin attack gives him something of an identity. Another welcome addition to the Super Star Wars universe, a password system. Phew. In the original game, when you died and had used up all your continues, that was it. You had to start again from the start. However, very kindly, starting with Super Empire Strikes Back, they included a password system so that you could write down the password when you were dead and you could just repeat from where you were. And at least with a password system included in Super Empire Strikes Back, you get the option to continue where you left off. Phew! Finally, the game is slightly more true to the story than the original. At least that will keep the Star Wars fanboys happy. Remember those fun Mode 7 levels that we spoke about from the original game, when you got to drive around in a land speeder and then an X-Wing fighter? Well, they've included something similar in the second game. Now, I've got to be honest, in the original game I wasn't too big a fan. The levels felt a little bit botched together, the vehicles were difficult to control, and overall the levels weren't particularly fun. They felt like they were more in the way of the real game. However, compared to the Mode 7 levels in this game, the ones in Super Star Wars were perfection. In Super Empire Strikes Back, you get to fly a Hoth Speeder thing and an X-Wing fighter again, but the levels suck. You spend so much of your time bouncing around and not enough actually doing anything fun. The idea is to shoot enough enemies to advance to the next part of the level, but they are so boring. I just want them over with. Give me back my lightsaber. About halfway through this game, you also get to be in charge of the Millennium Falcon. Yes! Or so you'd think. However, when I say in charge, you're not actually flying it. You're a little crosshair trying to shoot out TIE fighters and asteroids. You get a little radar at the bottom of the screen, and whenever it's green, there's a little green blob, that means the TIE fighter's in front of you. And when there's a red blob, it means the TIE fighter's behind you. Basically, what that equates to, a lot of turning around and not really knowing which direction you're heading in. Certainly not my idea or my expectations for the first ever time I'd get to fly the Millennium Falcon. It sucks. Now, speaking of levels, generally I do find them a little bit rubbish. Now, in the first game, they were lots of fun and so varied, but in this one there are just so many levels based in the same place. Like, in Hoth there's like 20 odd levels, and I mean, I'm not being funny, but how many times can you really put up with the same background? Snow, caves, and more snow. For a beginning to a game, it doesn't get much worse than this for making me want to throw the game away. Well, okay, it does, but anyway. The only levels I really enjoy are the Dagobah levels, and the problem with them is that they only last a couple of levels. I mean, they look awesome. The enemies in them, because it's Dagobah, are so interesting. But like I say, the actual levels only last like 2 or 3 levels, and then you're back off to the same monotony again. And that is really the biggest problem I have with this game. I know it's opinionated of me, but the game is based on the film The Empire Strikes Back. By far the best film out of the 3, and they're all really good films. So what happened? This game is not just The Empire Strikes Back, this game is Super Empire Strikes Back. And when you think about what it could have and should have been, it's just really disappointing. It's not that it's a bad game, it's a really good game, but it's just not what you would expect from a game called Super Empire Strikes Back. Maybe the expectations are too high, but it's based on such a great film that you just think they could have gone so far with it. Introduction of Yoda, Force powers, more Vader, these are all things that would have worked really well for a second game based on this franchise. But generally, the game is just a letdown. Don't get it confused. This game is good. Great even. The soundtrack is immense, it looks awesome, and the gameplay is tough but rewarding. However, for a game called Super Empire Strikes Back, it could have been so much more. I just find myself enjoying the other 2 games in the series more, which shouldn't be the case when I'm such a fan of The Empire Strikes Back. Now, it's not going to get a bad score because it's still really good. It's just not worthy of the name Super Empire Strikes Back. A very good, but unfulfilling, 79% for Super Empire Strikes Back. Super Empire Strikes Back is a really good game, but just misses its potential as being one of the best games on the Super Nintendo. Now, as they say, you should always leave the best till last, and by complete coincidence, that's actually what we've done. So, join me tomorrow when we look at the final part of the Super Star Wars review medley, Super Star Wars Return of the Jedi. And may the 4th be with you.